Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Shazani Akila binti Khalid. So in this video, my partner and I, we are going to present on two characters from R.K. Narayan's The Guide. So the topic that we have been assigned to present on was Rosie versus Raju's mother. So we are going to look at these two characters and discuss how they are different from one another and how it is significant to the story. So I will be presenting Rosie, and Atika will be presenting Raju's mother. In this book, Rosie is described to have come from a family of Devadasis, or basically temple dancers, whom Rosie herself described as viewed as public women, which means to say that they are not really respectable, nor are they considered civilized. However, Rosie's mother made sure that Rosie received enough education, that is by sending her to school, and Rosie is herself even had a master's degree in economics. Anyone who has read this book would also know that Rosie was married to Marco, who is of a higher social standing compared to her, because Marco was a person with wealth and higher class and of a higher class. Now that we have a brief information of the character Rosie, I would like to highlight some of her important traits. And the first trait in Rosie that I noticed is that she is definitely a risk taker, and this can be seen through her life choices, such as first by marrying Marco, and second by having a secret affair with Raju. So she has this tendency, or she's prone to taking risks. And first, which is by marrying Marco. So it can be said that by marrying Marco, she was actually risking her own culture and traditional art of dancing. Sure, she was marrying someone of a higher social status, but it was at the expense of her culture and tradition. And this was actually mentioned by Rosie herself towards the end of chapter 5. And that is only the first example. Another example of Rosie being a risk taker is when she started having a secret affair with Raju behind Marco. So Rosie perhaps felt better with Raju to some extent because Raju was appreciative of her art. And unlike Marco, who refused to acknowledge her talents, Raju was quick to have made Rosie felt somehow better. And to some extent, we can see that Rosie too was not really afraid to succumb to Raju's temptation. Another important trait about Rosie that I would like to highlight is the fact that she has the tendency to go against the norms or even the tradition. So first of all, the fact that her name itself was Rosie and not like any other common Indian women names is already telling of the kind of character that she is. So Rosie's relationship with Raju is also an evidence of her tendency to go against the norm. Uh, in the earlier part of the novel, of course, we can view her as someone who still abided by the common tradition of marriage, because she was married to Marco. But later on, we can gradually see how, despite her marital status, her relationship with Raju has developed. It has developed to the extent where, in the middle of the book, she even lived with Raju and his mother. And later on, Rosie learned that she was actually not welcomed by the mother, and arguments happened, and Raju's mother left. And even then, Rosie and Raju, they still lived together as if they were a married couple. And of course, for a man like Raju and for a woman like Rosie, whose marital status is still unsure of, is at that time to live together like a married couple, it is kind of not really the norms or the usual practice.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Atika binti Yaakob, and I will be presenting on the character of Raju's mother. Raju's mother is another minor woman character in the novel The Guide. She is a nagging wife, but she also shows no interest in the economic growth planning of her husband. She holds on to her son Raju when her husband died, and she also has a brother whom she refers to when things gone beyond her capability, such as when Rosie came to live in her house. Okay. Although Raju's mother is not being addressed as much as the other prominent characters in the novel The Guide, Raju's mother played a very significant role in the novel, in which she it enables the readers to put a comparison in between a modern Indian woman, which is being represented by Rosie, and also Raja's mother as a typical orthodox Indian woman. Raju's mother is a very caring and compassionate wife and mother. She sleeps only when her husband has come back from his work and at midnight. And while waiting for his husband to come home, she tells bedtime story to her son Raju. And this had created an inexplicable coziness, as being said by Raju to Valen. Being a mom, Raju's mother often advises her son on several occasions, such as she advises Raju to keep himself running the railway shop, as if she could forecast the bad things that would happen in the future if Raju is not doing so. And Raju's mother also warns him regarding Rosie, whom she called as the serpent woman. Next, despite Raju's mother's reluctance to have Rosie staying in her house, as she believes that a woman's place is always with her husband. So Raju's mother still proves that she is a tolerant Indian woman by treating Rosie in a good manner, and she is not misbehaving her. She also thread her words wisely so that she won't hurt Rosie while advising her. Raju also described her mother in this following narration. After a few days, she began to allude to the problems of husband and wife whenever she spoke to Rosie, and filled the time with anecdotes about husbands. Good husbands, bad husbands, reasonable husbands, unreasonable husbands, savage ones, slightly deranged ones, moody ones, and so on and so forth. It was always the wife, by her doggedness, perseverance, and patience, that brought him round. Although Raju's mother is a woman who holds on steadfastly to her tradition, she was impressed by the education possessed by Rosie despite of her being a woman from a lower social class. Lastly, Raju's mother is a very steadfast woman in holding on to what she believed and towards her tradition. So despite having to leave her house, in which it has a very sentimental memories of her husband, and she shows her disappointment and her devastation um, for the violation made by Raju towards the traditional principle that she holds dear. So, as compared to Rosie, whom at first willing to sacrifice her interest in dancing so that she could be in a higher caste status, Raju's mother stayed and willing to sacrifice what she has just to hold on to the tradition that she holds on to. So to conclude, Rosie's and Raju's mother represent both modern and traditional Indian women. So despite the characters' different point of views on the family system and tradition, um, both of them represent the good traits of the Indian women who are very compassionate towards those they love.
All in all, it can be concluded from both of these characters is that they are both important to the storyline of the guide. So, of course, there are some differences in the characters, and I believe that it is the differences between them that makes them important to the storyline. So, for example, we know how Rosie is young and Raju's mother is of course older, so there has to be like some kind of difference in mentality. And while I can say that young Rosie is more open to new things and adventures, Raju's mother, she is more traditional, and I believe that she represents the idea of the traditional women in India. And it is also because of the differences between them that conflicts arise, and it is through the conflicts that we get an idea of the status of women like Rosie in the Indian society, or maybe even the depiction of the society as a whole, where they like how they treat the lower caste. For example, in the book we can see how Raju's mother, she had this kind of prejudice towards Rosie for being a serpent woman. Um, and she, even though initially she was really nice towards Rosie, but there arrived a point where she made it clear that she's not really comfortable with the idea of Rosie being a serpent woman, and and living with them and to be with Raju. So this basically the relationship between Rosie and Raju's mother demonstrates the kind of stigma and prejudice toward women of the lower class, and that are ingrained in the society. So that's how they are, both important to the storyline. But however, if we were to compare on who has more influence to the plot, I would say that it is Rosie. So this is not because mainly because Rosie was with Raju, but it's about how Rosie has this ability to influence Raju in most of his decisions. Like, even though the story is about Raju, since he is the guide here, we can see how most of Raju's decision that led him to becoming what he was in the book was mostly because of Rosie. Like, he was very infatuated with Rosie, and I could say that to some extent he was perhaps obsessed with Rosie. So, like, he was willing to do anything. He was even willing to fight his mother and his uncle just to be with Rosie. And we can also see how he went from having a secret relationship with Rosie to helping her realize her dream to the point that they become well known. So this is an example. This just shows how big the influence that Rosie has on Raju, that he was actually willing to do almost anything. So all in all, I can say that while both of them are important, both Raju's mother and Rosie are important characters, but I would say that Rosie has more influence in the storyline. So that is all from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.